The sacred mirror had never shown an Omega. Not once. For 700 years, every Omega ordered to stand before it became nothing more than an empty space inside its silver surface. The nobles called it proof that Omegas carried no royal destiny. The priests called it the moon, goddess's judgment. The people simply accepted it as truth. Until tonight, the great hall stood silent beneath hundreds of burning chandeliers. Thousands of wolves, alphas, betas, nobles, warriors, servants, held their breath as a frightened young Omega stumbled forward, clutching a bucket of spilled water against her chest. She wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't even supposed to be seen. Then the sacred mirror rippled like moonlight across a frozen lake. For the first time in 7 centuries, it reflected an Omega. Not just any reflection. It smiled. Blue fire burst from every torch in the palace. Ancient silver symbols bloomed across the mirror's surface like living vines. An old voice, forgotten by history itself, echoed through the hall. The last daughter has returned. Steel rang through the silence. The Alpha King slowly unsheathed his sword, not to strike, to kneel. And in that impossible moment, the entire kingdom realized everything it believed about Omegas might have been a lie. Winter had wrapped the kingdom of Velrune in quiet white silence. Snow rested upon the towering stone walls of the royal palace, softening even the sharpest towers beneath a blanket of silver. The icy wind carried the scent of pine forests and distant fireplaces, while the palace bells echoed across the mountain valley, calling every noble family to the annual moon coronation festival. For the nobles, it was a celebration. For servants like Lyra Ashvale, it was simply the busiest night of the year. She balanced 2 heavy buckets of water as she hurried through the endless corridors, careful not to leave muddy footprints across the polished marble floors. Her plain gray servant's dress had already become damp from melted snow, and loose strands of chestnut hair clung to her cheeks. "Faster, girl!" shouted the head steward without looking at her. "The sacred hall must shine before the nobles arrive." Lyra lowered her eyes. "Yes, sir." She never argued, not because she was afraid, because arguing changed nothing. She had learned that lesson years ago. The Omega servants moved like quiet shadows through the palace. They scrubbed floors before sunrise, prepared fires before winter dawn, and disappeared long before the royal families entered each room. Invisible. That was how life remained peaceful. That was how Omega survived. As Lyra polished the silver railings leading toward the sacred hall, she paused for only a heartbeat. The enormous doors stood slightly open. Beyond them waited the legendary sacred mirror. She had heard stories about it since childhood. Every servant had. Some whispered it had been carved from moonlight itself. Others claimed it remembered every ruler who had ever stood before it. Children frightened one another by saying it could see lies hidden inside the soul. But there was one story every Omega knew. The mirror had never reflected one of them. Not ever. 700 years. 7 centuries of empty silver. Lyra smiled sadly to herself. "It's only a mirror," she whispered. Still, she had never actually seen it. Her curiosity tugged gently against her better judgment. Only one quick glance. No one would notice. She quietly stepped inside. The sacred hall stole her breath. Massive white pillars stretched toward a ceiling painted with constellations. Hundreds of silver candles illuminated walls carved with wolves running beneath full moons. Ancient banners hung perfectly still despite the cold air drifting through stained-glass windows. At the center of everything stood the mirror. It was taller than 3 grown wolves standing upon each other. Its frame shimmered with silver branches, wolves, stars, and crescent moons woven into impossible patterns that seemed almost alive. Yet its surface looked strangely empty, not reflective, almost asleep. Lyra stared longer than she should have. Something about it felt lonely. A sharp voice shattered the silence. "There you are!" The head steward stormed inside. "What are you doing?" Lyra startled, losing her grip on the wooden bucket. Water splashed across the polished floor. "No!" The heavy bucket rolled away. She rushed after it. Her boots slid across the wet marble. She lost her balance. For one terrifying second, the entire world tipped sideways. She fell directly toward the sacred mirror. Gasps erupted behind her. The great palace doors had opened. The royal procession had arrived. King Kaelan Varen entered first, wearing black ceremonial armor trimmed with silver fur. Behind him walked noble alphas, ancient elders, foreign ambassadors, priests, and nearly every powerful figure in Velrune. Every eye turned toward the falling Omega. Lyra caught herself just before striking the mirror. Her trembling hands rested against the cold stone beneath its frame. I'm sorry. Silence answered. Complete silence. Even the torches seemed to stop crackling. Then, the silver surface rippled. Not from her touch, from within, like moonlight disturbed by invisible rain. Someone whispered, "No!" An elder priest stumbled backward. "Impossible!" The mirror brightened. Soft silver light spread across its surface. For 700 years, it had remained empty before every Omega. Tonight, a reflection slowly appeared, not of a crowded hall, not of the nobles, only Lyra. She looked exactly as she stood. Wet clothes, messy hair, wide frightened eyes. The reflection blinked. Then, it smiled. Lyra hadn't. A freezing wind burst through the sacred hall. Every torch exploded into brilliant blue flames. Ancient symbols awakened across the mirror's frame, glowing brighter than the winter moon. The floor trembled beneath everyone's feet. Some nobles fell to one knee. Others backed away in terror. Grand Seer Melis stared at the mirror as every trace of color drained from her face. "It remembers." King Kalen stepped forward slowly, never taking his eyes off the impossible reflection. His father's final words echoed through his memory. "If the mirror ever wakes, the kingdom will discover what we stole." His hand tightened around the hilt of his ceremonial sword. The reflection inside the mirror slowly lifted its hand. Not Lyra's hand, its own. Its fingers pressed gently against the inside of the silver glass. Then an ancient feminine voice echoed through every corner of the palace. "Calm, gentle, older than memory itself. The last daughter has returned." The hall erupted into terrified whispers. But Kalen did something no one expected. He drew his sword. The ringing steel echoed through the chamber. The nobles instinctively reached for their own weapons. Lyra's heart nearly stopped. Then, the Alpha King turned the blade downward, placed one knee upon the marble floor, and bowed his head before the frightened Omega servant. Behind him, every wolf in the hall stood frozen. Because if the king had chosen to kneel, then nothing in Velrune would ever be the same again. As the last echoes of the ancient voice faded, a single crack spread across the sacred mirror's silver surface. From deep within the glass, another whisper emerged, too soft for anyone except Lyra to hear. "Find me, before they silence history again." The crack in the sacred mirror did not spread any farther. Yet no one dared move. The blue flames burning in every torch cast strange shadows across the sacred hall, making the ancient wolves carved into the marble pillars appear almost alive. The nobles stood frozen, unable to decide whether they had witnessed a blessing or the beginning of a catastrophe. Lyra's knees trembled. She looked from the glowing mirror to the Alpha King, still kneeling before her, unable to understand what was happening. "Your Majesty," she whispered, almost pleading. "Please stand. You've mistaken me for someone else." Kalen slowly lifted his head. His silver-gray eyes studied her carefully, not with admiration, nor with fear, but with the disciplined caution of a ruler who had spent his life weighing every decision. "I don't kneel to servants," he said quietly. He glanced toward the mirror. "I kneel to truth." Those words echoed through the chamber more loudly than any shout. Duchess Seraphine's face hardened. "This is madness," she declared. "A palace relic has malfunctioned. We should seal the hall before panic spreads." Grand Seer Melis stepped forward almost too quickly. "No one touches the mirror." Her voice shook despite her effort to remain composed. "No one." Kalen noticed. Melis had guarded the sacred mirror for nearly 40 years. She had remained calm during wars, coronations, even royal funerals. Tonight, she looked frightened. Not of Lyra, of the mirror itself. That frightened him more than anything else. Within an hour, rumors had escaped the palace. Servants whispered while carrying firewood. Guards exchanged uneasy glances atop the walls. Kitchen workers forgot their meals as they repeated impossible stories. The mirror reflected an Omega. It called her the last daughter. The king knelt. By midnight, the tale had already reached the lower districts of Velrune. Some dismissed it as drunken gossip. Others quietly locked their doors. The oldest wolves simply stared into the snow, remembering stories their grandparents had once told before warning them never to repeat them. Lyra was escorted, not imprisoned, but not free either, to a small guest chamber overlooking the palace gardens. The room was warmer than anything she had ever slept in. Fresh blankets, a roaring fireplace, a wooden table covered with untouched bread, soup, roasted vegetables, and honey. She remained standing near the window. It didn't feel like kindness. It felt like waiting. A gentle knock interrupted the silence. Prince Cashin entered carrying a wooden tray. Unlike the formal court officials, he wore no ceremonial robes now, only a dark wool cloak dusted with melting snow. "You haven't eaten." "I'm not hungry." He smiled faintly. "No." He placed the tray down. "You're terrified." Lyra looked away. "I cleaned floors this morning." She laughed softly, though no joy reached her voice. "Now people are calling me a prophecy." Cashin had no answer. After a long silence, he simply said, "The king ordered that no one enters this room without permission." She looked surprised. "Why?" "Because half the court wants to protect you." He hesitated. "The other half wants to make sure the mirror never reflects you again." Far below the palace, hidden beyond the royal kitchens, Elder Rowan sat beside a small stone hearth. She had already heard, not from gossip, from the wolves. 3 old gray wolves rested outside her cottage despite the heavy snow. They had not visited together in years. Animals always sensed what humans ignored. Rowan closed the worn leather book resting on her lap. Its pages were nearly falling apart. Most of its writing had faded long ago. Only one illustration remained clear. A silver mirror, a young queen, and beneath it, one sentence: "When the mirror remembers, the forgotten blood shall return, not to reclaim a throne, but to restore the truth." Her weathered hands trembled. "So," she whispered into the fire, "it finally found her." The next morning, the palace awakened under a sky of pale winter blue. Nothing looked different, yet everything had changed. Servants lowered their voices whenever Lyra passed. Some bowed slightly, others avoided looking at her altogether. The Omega workers seemed even more confused. One young girl quietly reached for Lyra's hand. "Does it hurt?" Lyra blinked. "What?" "Being chosen." Lyra smiled sadly. "I don't think I've been chosen." The girl tilted her head. "Then why does everyone suddenly see you?" Lyra had no answer. King Kalen stood alone inside the sacred hall. The crack across the mirror remained exactly where it had appeared the previous night. Nothing more, nothing less. He dismissed every guard, every priest, every servant. Only Grand Seer Melis remained. "You knew something." She remained silent. "Answer me." Her eyes stayed fixed on the mirror. "I knew only enough to fear this day." Kalen frowned. "My father searched for answers until the day he died." Melis closed her eyes. He searched because someone told him the sacred mirror judged Omegas unfairly. And it never did. The words landed like falling stone. Kalen slowly turned toward her. "What did you say?" Melis lowered her voice. "The mirror was never created to judge blood. It judged hearts." Before Kalen could ask another question, she stepped backward. "I've already said too much." Then she left him alone with the mirror. And for the first time since becoming king, Kalen questioned whether every lesson he had ever been taught had been carefully designed to hide something. That afternoon, Lyra received permission to visit Elder Rowan under royal escort. The journey through the snow-covered streets felt strange. People watched from windows. Some smiled hopefully. Others quickly closed their shutters. Children whispered, "That's her! The mirror girl! The king's chosen!" Lyra wished she could disappear again. She missed being invisible. Invisible people were rarely hated. Rowan opened her cottage door before Lyra could knock. For a long moment, neither spoke. The old healer simply cupped Lyra's face with both hands. "They found you sooner than I hoped." Lyra stared. "You knew." Rowan sighed. "I prayed I was wrong." She guided Lyra inside, where the familiar scent of pine herbs and warm bread calmed her racing heart. On the table lay the ancient leather book. Rowan carefully opened it. Most pages were blank with age. Then she revealed the surviving illustration. Lyra froze. It was the sacred mirror, exactly as it stood in the palace, except a woman stood before it. Not an alpha, not a noble, She wore simple white robes with no crown upon her head. Above her reflection floated the same silver symbols that had appeared the previous night. Lyra's voice barely escaped. "Who is she?" Rowan looked into the fireplace before answering. "The first queen. I thought the first ruler was an alpha king. That's what history says." Another long silence settled over the cottage. Finally, Rowan whispered words that changed everything. "No, child. The kingdom had a queen before it ever had a king." Lyra felt the room spin. If that was true, then someone had erased an entire ruler from history. But why? Before Rowan could continue, a sharp howl echoed through the snowy valley. Not one wolf. Several. Urgent. Warning. Moments later, a royal guard burst through the cottage door, his breathing ragged. "Your Majesty's orders!" He looked directly at Lyra. "Someone broke into the sacred hall. They didn't steal the mirror." His face turned pale. "They stole the cloth that wiped your blood from its surface." Ending hook. As the guard finished speaking, another messenger arrived from the palace carrying even darker news. He looked directly at King Kaelin and uttered 5 words that chilled the entire kingdom. "Someone is hunting her blood." The words settled over the room like fresh snowfall. Someone is hunting her blood. No one spoke. The crackling fire inside Rowan's cottage suddenly sounded unnaturally loud. Lyra looked from the frightened messenger to her grandmother, then to Prince Cassian, who had arrived only moments earlier with a squad of royal guards. "My blood?" Lyra asked quietly. "Why would anyone want it?" The messenger lowered his eyes. "They didn't steal jewels. They didn't touch the royal treasury. They searched only for the cloth that carried your blood from the sacred mirror." A chill spread through the room. Elder Rowan slowly closed the ancient book resting on the table. "They're trying to prove something," she murmured. Kaelin's voice came from the doorway before anyone else could answer. "Or hide it." Everyone turned. The Alpha King had come without ceremony. Snow clung to the shoulders of his black winter cloak, and only 2 trusted guards stood behind him. His expression remained calm, but the sharpness in his silver eyes betrayed a sleepless night. He looked first at Lyra. "Are you hurt?" She blinked in surprise. "No." He gave a small nod, satisfied. Only then did he address the others. "From this moment forward, Lyra Ashvale does not leave the palace grounds without my permission." Rowan frowned. "You intend to imprison her?" Kaelin met the old healer's gaze. "I intend to keep her alive." The journey back to the palace was silent. Fresh snow covered the mountain road, muffling every hoofbeat and every footstep. Lyra rode inside a covered carriage beside Rowan, while Kaelin and Cassian traveled on horseback outside. For a long time, Lyra simply watched the white landscape pass through the frosted window. The forests of Velrune looked peaceful. Ancient pines stood heavy beneath blankets of snow. Frozen rivers shimmered beneath pale winter sunlight. Nothing about the kingdom suggested it was quietly beginning to tear itself apart. Finally she spoke. "Grandmother." Rowan looked up. If the first queen truly existed, why would anyone erase her? The old healer smiled sadly. "Because truth can frighten powerful people more than lies ever do." Outside, Kaelin guided his horse alongside Cassian's. "The nobles!" Cassian sighed. "Already dividing themselves." "Seraphine!" Gathering support. Kaelin wasn't surprised. Duchess Seraphine had always believed the kingdom survived because every wolf accepted their place. An Omega recognized by the sacred mirror threatened more than tradition. It threatened the foundation of noble authority. "The council meets tonight," Cassian continued. "They'll demand the girl be examined." Kaelin's jaw tightened. "She's not an object." "No." Cassian glanced toward the carriage. "But half the kingdom already thinks she is." By sunset, the palace had become a fortress. Extra guards lined every corridor leading toward the sacred hall. No servant entered without inspection. Even the oldest priests surrendered their ceremonial knives before approaching the sacred mirror. Yet despite all the precautions, something inside the hall had changed. The mirror no longer reflected the room. Its silver surface flowed slowly, like moonlight drifting across deep water. No one dared touch it. Grandseer, Melis refused to let anyone approach within 10 steps. "It is remembering," she whispered. No one understood what she meant. Late that evening, unable to sleep, Lyra wandered onto the quiet palace balcony overlooking the snow-covered gardens. The air was cold enough to sting her lungs. Moonlight covered the frozen hedges in silver. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howled softly to one another across the mountains. She wrapped her arms around herself. "I've ruined everything," she whispered. A calm voice answered behind her. "No." She turned. Kalen stood in the doorway. He carried 2 steaming cups. He offered one to her. She hesitated before accepting it. Warm herbal tea. Its gentle scent reminded her of Rowan's cottage. "You remembered," she said softly. "You don't drink wine." He leaned against the stone railing. "My father believed rulers should notice small things." Lyra smiled faintly. "He sounds wise." He was. A quiet sadness crossed his face. He died looking for answers the council insisted didn't exist. Neither spoke for several moments. Snow drifted silently between them. Finally Lyra looked toward the moon. "Do you believe the mirror chose me?" Kalen answered honestly. "I don't know." She nodded. "Neither do I." Then she asked the question he hadn't expected. "If it hadn't reflected me, would you even know my name?" The words lingered between them. Kalen considered lying. Instead he chose the truth. "No." Lyra smiled. Not with bitterness. Only acceptance. "I thought so." Something inside him shifted. Not guilt. Respect. Because she hadn't accused him. She had simply spoken reality. Near midnight, an urgent knock echoed through Lyra's chamber. Grand Seer Melis stood outside, carrying an old iron lantern. "Come with me." Lyra frowned. "The king ordered." "I already have his permission." Moments later, Kalen joined them in the corridor. Without explanation, Melis led them through silent palace halls toward the sacred mirror. The enormous chamber stood empty. Only moonlight entered through the stained-glass windows. The blue flames from the previous night had vanished. Everything seemed strangely still. "The mirror wishes to see her," Melis whispered. Kalen immediately stepped forward. "How can a mirror wish for anything?" The old seer looked toward the silver glass. "Because it is older than this kingdom." Lyra slowly approached. Every instinct told her to stop. Yet the closer she came, the warmer the air became. When she stood only a few feet away, the crack across the mirror shimmered. Soft ripples spread across its surface. Then, the hall disappeared. Lyra gasped. She was no longer looking at her reflection. She was looking through the mirror. A different palace stood beyond the silver glass. The same mountains, the same moon, yet everything looked brighter. Alive. Omegas walked openly beside Alphas. Children laughed together without fear. Warriors bowed respectfully to women wearing silver crowns. At the center of the vision stood a young queen dressed in simple white robes. No jewels, no throne. She rested one hand upon the sacred mirror exactly as Lyra had. The queen slowly turned. Her face was beautiful, gentle, kind. But her eyes, they carried unbearable sorrow. She looked directly at Lyra, raised trembling fingers toward the glass, opened her mouth. No sound came. Instead, tears rolled silently down her cheeks. Lyra instinctively lifted her own hand. Their fingertips almost touched through the silver surface. Then, the vision shattered. A deafening crack thundered across the chamber. The sacred mirror trembled violently. Silver fractures spread across its surface like lightning racing through frozen ice. Every torch in the hall burst into darkness. Kalen rushed forward, pulling Lyra away just as a shard of glowing crystal fell from the frame and shattered across the marble floor. Melis collapsed to her knees. "No!" Her voice broke. "It has begun." Kalen stared at the widening cracks. "What has begun?" The old seer's eyes filled with tears. "The mirror is dying." As everyone watched in stunned silence, one final image briefly appeared inside the fractured mirror. Not the first queen. Not Lyra. A hooded man standing deep beneath the palace, placing a royal seal upon an ancient scroll before locking it inside a hidden stone chamber. Then the image vanished. The mirror went dark, leaving Kalen with one terrifying realization. Someone in his own royal bloodline had buried the truth 700 years ago. The sacred mirror remained dark, not cloudy, not asleep, empty. Its once luminous silver surface had become dull, as though something ancient inside it had exhausted itself trying to be heard. The shard that had fallen onto the marble floor no longer glowed. It rested quietly beside Lyra's feet like an ordinary piece of broken glass. No one reached for it. Even the palace guards kept their distance. Grand Seer Meili slowly rose, her knees shaking beneath her robes. She stared at the fractured mirror with the grief of someone watching an old friend take its final breath. "It remembered too much," she whispered. Kalen turned toward her. "Stop speaking in riddles." His voice was calm, but the steel beneath it was unmistakable. "My father died searching for these answers. The mirror has shown us enough to prove our history is incomplete." He stepped closer. "I want the truth." Melis closed her eyes. "The truth has never been buried because it was weak." She looked directly at him. "It was buried because it was powerful." Before dawn, the palace council gathered inside the Hall of Ancestors. Normally, the chamber echoed with debate over harvests, trade, and border disputes. Today, no one mentioned any of those matters. Every conversation circled back to one subject: the Omega. Duchess Seraphine stood before the council in a gown as white as fresh snow, her silver hair braided with the crest of House Stern. She waited until every noble had fallen silent. "The sacred mirror is damaged." Several counselors nodded. "A coincidence," one muttered. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. "No." She spoke with the confidence of someone who genuinely believed she was protecting the kingdom. "The mirror awakened because ancient laws were broken." Another noble leaned forward. "You believe the girl caused this?" "I believe," Seraphine replied carefully, "that desperate people often mistake disasters for miracles." She turned toward Kalen. "Your Majesty, if this servant truly carries some forgotten bloodline, then every rival kingdom will seek to control her." "And if she carries no such bloodline?" Kalen asked. "Then she is an innocent girl standing at the center of a lie." The chamber grew quiet. Seraphine studied him for a long moment. "You've already chosen her side?" Kalen answered without hesitation. "I've chosen the truth." While the council argued, Lyra wandered through one of the palace's oldest libraries under Rowan's supervision. Dust floated lazily through narrow beams of winter sunlight. Towering shelves stretched toward vaulted ceilings, filled with books so old their leather bindings had turned gray with age. Lyra gently traced a finger across one shelf. "How many stories are here?" Rowan smiled. "Thousands." "And yet—" Lyra looked around. None mentioned the first queen. Rowan's smile faded. "Exactly." The silence that followed felt heavier than any answer. Lyra moved from shelf to shelf, reading faded titles. Kings of Velrune, The Great Winter Wars, The Rise of the Northern Pax, The Line of Alpha Rulers. Nothing before the first king. Nothing. It was as if history itself had simply begun in the middle. She stopped. "Grandmother." Rowan looked over. "Isn't that strange?" "What is?" "If an entire queen vanished from history." Lyra rested her hand on a dusty shelf. "Someone would have needed to remove every story." Rowan's eyes widened. Not because Lyra was wrong. Because she was beginning to think exactly like the woman Rowan had once known. Later that afternoon, Kalen entered the royal library alone. He found Lyra sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by stacks of forgotten records. She looked up quickly. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have touched anything." "You organized them." He noticed the neat piles. Military records, royal decrees, family registers. Even under pressure, she instinctively searched for patterns. Kalen knelt beside one stack. "What did you find?" Lyra hesitated. "I found what isn't here." He frowned. "What do you mean?" She gently slid several ancient books toward him. "Every history book begins with King Alaric. So, if he truly founded Velrune." She opened another volume. "Why do all the buildings, traditions, and ceremonies already exist?" Kalen looked carefully. She was right. The first written king supposedly established the kingdom. Yet the earliest records described fully built castles, long-established festivals, ancient laws, even the sacred mirror itself. None of it made sense. "It's as if," Lyra whispered, "someone tore the first chapters out of every book." Kalen stared at her. His father had spent decades searching through these same shelves. Yet this quiet servant had noticed the missing pieces in one afternoon. Not because she knew more, because she saw differently. For the first time, he understood why the mirror had smiled. That evening, Melis quietly approached the king. "There is one place we haven't searched." Kalen folded an old map. "The archives have already been examined." "Not those." She lowered her voice. "The Moon Archive, Kaelin froze. The name sounded almost mythical. I thought it was destroyed. So did everyone. Melis glanced around to ensure no one listened. It wasn't destroyed. It was hidden. Beneath the palace, a narrow stone staircase descended into darkness. The entrance lay concealed behind a carved fireplace in the abandoned western wing, a part of the castle closed for generations after an earthquake. Kaelin carried a lantern. Cashin followed with a torch. Rowan walked slowly despite her age. Lyra came last. The deeper they descended, the colder the air became. Ancient dust covered every step. No footprints. No signs of life. Only silence. Finally, the passage opened into a circular chamber unlike anything Lyra had ever seen. Hundreds of stone shelves curved around the room. Every shelf held sealed scrolls wrapped in faded blue silk. Moon symbols decorated the walls. The air smelled of old parchment and cedar. "The Moon Archive," Melis whispered. "It survived." Lyra walked slowly between the shelves. Her fingertips brushed centuries of forgotten knowledge. One scroll had fallen onto the floor long ago. She picked it up carefully. Its royal seal had already cracked with age. Kaelin nodded. "Open it." Lyra slowly unrolled the parchment. Beautiful silver ink still shimmered faintly across the ancient page. At the top appeared a royal crest unlike any used in modern Velrune. Beneath it, written in elegant script, were 7 words. "By decree of Her Majesty, Queen Lyra." Everyone stopped breathing. Queen. Not Luna. Not consort. Not regent. Queen. Kaelin stared at the name. There was never a Queen Lyra. Rowan looked at him with quiet sadness. There was. Melis gently reached for another scroll. Then another. Every one carried the same royal seal. Every one was signed by Queen Lyra. For several long moments, no one spoke. History had not forgotten her. History had been erased. Then Cashin discovered something far more disturbing. Hidden beneath the stack of royal decrees lay another document. Much newer. Only 700 years old. It carried the seal of King Alaric, the first official Alpha ruler. Kaelin carefully broke the wax seal. His eyes moved across the page. His expression slowly changed. "What is it?" Lyra asked. He looked up. His voice had become almost hollow. "This isn't a history record." "What is it?" Kaelin swallowed. "It's an order. An order to destroy every record bearing Queen Lyra's name." The chamber fell into absolute silence. 700 years of lies had begun with a single royal command. As Kaelin rolled the decree shut, another folded parchment slipped from inside it. Unlike the others, it bore no royal seal. Only a single sentence written in hurried ink. "If the mirror ever awakens again, never let the last daughter reach the catacombs beneath the palace." The blood is genuine. No one asked what that meant. They all understood. One question remained. What do we do now? The oldest figure slowly extinguished the candle. "We finish what our ancestors began." That night, Kaelin personally escorted Lyra back to her chambers. Neither hurried. The palace corridors were unusually quiet. Snow tapped softly against stained glass windows. Finally, Lyra broke the silence. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." She hesitated. "If everything we found is true." She looked down the empty corridor. "What if people hate me even more?" Kaelin considered the question carefully. "They already fear change." "Exactly. They may hate what changes." He stopped walking. "But they won't hate the person who chooses compassion while everyone else chooses anger." Lyra looked at him. "How can you be so certain?" A faint smile appeared. "Because that's exactly what my father did." For the first time, neither king nor servant spoke. They simply stood together in the quiet corridor, sharing the weight of truths neither had asked to carry. Trust did not arrive suddenly. It settled gently between them. Like fresh snow. Near midnight, an icy wind swept through the palace. Every torch flickered. Guards exchanged nervous glances. Somewhere deep within the sacred hall, a loud metallic groan echoed through the empty corridors. Grand Seer Melis awoke instantly. She ran. Kaelin heard it moments later. He reached the hall, just as the enormous doors burst open. The sacred mirror had changed. The silver surface no longer reflected anything. Not walls. Not torchlight. Not people. Only endless darkness. As though the mirror had become a doorway into a night with no stars. Melis collapsed in horror. No. We're too late. Kaelin turned sharply. Where is Lyra? A guard came running, breathless. Your Majesty! The guards outside Lady Lyra's chamber. He struggled to breathe. They were found unconscious. Kaelin's blood ran cold. And Lyra? The guard lowered his head. She's gone. At that exact moment, the black surface of a sacred mirror rippled once. Just once. A single image appeared for the briefest heartbeat. Stone stairs. Deep underground. A hand reaching toward a silver door. Then, darkness swallowed everything again. Kaelin gripped the hilt of his sword as the horrifying realization struck him. The kidnappers hadn't taken Lyra away from the palace. They had taken her deeper into it, somewhere beneath the castle. Beyond the forgotten passages, the sealed catacombs were waiting, and for the first time in 700 years, someone intended to reach them before the last daughter could. The warning lay between them like a living thing. If the mirror ever awakens again, never let the last daughter reach the catacombs beneath the palace. No signature, no date, only hurried handwriting that looked as though it had been written by someone who feared every passing second. Kaelin folded the parchment carefully. The catacombs. Cashin frowned. I've never heard of royal catacombs beneath the palace. You weren't meant to. Grandsire Malus' voice was almost a whisper. The oldest passages were sealed long before any of us were born. Rowan slowly traced the faded words with trembling fingers. They weren't sealed to keep people out. She looked toward the darkness stretching beyond the archive. They were sealed to keep the truth buried. They returned to the palace just before sunrise. No one outside their small group knew what they had discovered. Or so they believed. High above them, hidden behind frost-covered windows overlooking the western courtyard, Duchess Seraphine watched their return in silence. A servant approached cautiously. My lady! She never looked away from the courtyard. They found something. Yes. Seraphine's expression remained unreadable. The western passages have been closed for centuries. The guards reported torchlight. She closed the curtain. So, the king finally found the moon archive. The servant swallowed nervously. What should we do? For several heartbeats, Seraphine remained silent. When she finally spoke, there was no hatred in her voice. Only fear. If those records become public, the kingdom will stop believing in the laws that have kept peace for 700 years. She looked toward the sacred hall. We cannot allow chaos to wear the face of justice. By midday, whispers had become arguments. Arguments became accusations. Every marketplace in Velrune buzzed with conflicting stories. The Omega bewitched the mirror. No, the mirror exposed a forgotten queen. The king has lost his judgment. The nobles are hiding something. Even blacksmiths paused their hammers. Children repeated rumors they barely understood. Old wolves who had spent decades silent now exchanged uneasy glances, remembering stories their grandparents had forbidden them to tell. Velrune had not yet descended into violence, but something more dangerous had begun. No one trusted certainty anymore. Inside the palace gardens, Lyra finally escaped the endless questions. Snowflakes drifted gently around the frozen queen's garden, where ancient stone statues stood beneath blankets of white. Most servants avoided the place. They believed the forgotten queens wandered there after sunset. Lyra had always found it peaceful. She knelt beside a frozen fountain, watching tiny birds search for seeds beneath the snow. One little gray bird hopped onto the edge of the fountain. Instead of flying away, it tilted its head toward her. Then another landed. Then another. Within moments, half a dozen winter birds surrounded her without fear. She smiled softly. You've chosen the wrong person. One tiny bird chirped. Lyra laughed for the first time in days. Hidden several steps away, Kaelin watched the scene unnoticed. He had come intending to discuss the archive. Instead, he remained perfectly still. Animals rarely ignored rank. Most creatures instinctively kept their distance from powerful alphas. Yet these birds had flown past every guard, past the king himself, simply to sit beside Lyra. Not because she called them, because they trusted her. He remembered Rowan's words. Truth recognizes those who never ask to possess it. Perhaps the mirror had not been the first to recognize her. Only the last. That evening, the royal council convened once more. This time, the chamber overflowed with tension. Duchess Seraphine stepped forward, carrying a sealed document. Your Majesty! She bowed respectfully. I request temporary custody of Lyra Ashvale. Every conversation stopped. Kaelin's expression remained calm. For what purpose? A protective examination. Cashin laughed quietly. No examination requires noble custody. Seraphine ignored him. If rival kingdoms truly seek her blood, she belongs somewhere secure. Kaelin answered immediately. She belongs where she chooses. The Duchess met his eyes. You are allowing emotion to cloud judgment. No. Kaelin's voice remained level. I am refusing to repeat the mistakes of history. Several counselors exchanged uneasy glances. He had never spoken so openly before. Seraphine realized something important in that moment. The king no longer doubted the old records. He believed them. And once a king believes the truth, fear alone cannot silence him. Far beneath the palace, another meeting unfolded. No crowns, no council, only shadows. 5 hooded figures stood around a circular stone table illuminated by a single candle. Their faces remained hidden. One spoke first. The mirror is breaking. Another nodded. The girl has already seen too much. A third placed a blood-stained cloth upon the table. The very cloth stolen from the sacred hall. Our scholars confirmed it. Silence followed. Finally, the oldest among them whispered. Kaelin did not wait for dawn. The moment the image vanished from the sacred mirror, he turned toward the palace guards, his voice cutting through the stunned silence like winter steel. Seal every gate. Within seconds, horns echoed across the palace walls. Their deep notes rolled through the sleeping city below. Guards rushed to the towers. Bridges were raised. Archers climbed onto snow-covered battlements. Servants peered nervously through narrow windows, unsure whether the kingdom faced an invasion or a rebellion. Only Kaelin knew the truth. Perhaps it was both. The corridor outside Lyra's chamber showed almost no signs of struggle. 2 elite guards lay unconscious against the wall, their breathing steady but unnaturally slow. The royal physician examined them and frowned. No wounds. No poison. He lifted one guard's eyelid. They've been put into a deep sleep. Rowan knelt beside them, inhaling carefully. Her expression darkened. Moonshade root. Cashin looked puzzled. I've never heard of it. You weren't meant to. Rowan stood slowly. It was once used by royal healers. She met Kaelin's gaze. Someone inside the palace prepared this. The realization struck everyone at once. The kidnappers had not broken into the castle. They had walked through it. Far below the western wing, Lyra slowly opened her eyes. The air smelled of damp stone and ancient earth. A dull ache throbbed behind her temples. For several moments, she remembered nothing. Then fragments returned. A knock at her chamber door. A servant carrying warm tea. A strange sweetness in the steam. Darkness. She sat upright. Cold iron chains rested around her wrists, not painfully tight, but impossible to remove. The room surrounding her was unlike any place she had ever seen. It wasn't a dungeon. There were no torture racks. No prison bars. Instead, she found herself inside an enormous underground sanctuary carved entirely from pale gray stone. Massive pillars disappeared into darkness above. Ancient wolf statues lined the walls, each bowing toward a circular chamber ahead. Hundreds of candles burned without flickering, though no wind reached this forgotten place. At the center stood a single silver door. Unlike every other object underground, it gleamed as though untouched by time. The same crescent moon, symbol carved upon the sacred mirror, rested at its center. Lyra's heartbeat quickened. The catacombs. Soft footsteps echoed behind her. She turned. 5 hooded figures emerged from the shadows. One stepped forward. Unlike the others, the oldest among them removed his hood. His hair had long since turned white. Deep lines marked a face worn by decades of difficult choices. His eyes carried neither cruelty nor kindness, only exhaustion. My name no longer matters. His voice was calm. But once, my family guarded this place. Lyra lifted her chin despite the fear rising inside her. Why bring me here? He looked toward the silver door. Because only your blood can open it. Back above, Kaelin stood before the cracked sacred mirror once more. Its surface remained black. He rested one hand against the cold silver frame. If you truly remember, he whispered, show me where she is. Nothing happened. Silence. Then, the tiny shard that had fallen from the mirror days earlier began to glow inside Mela's hands. Not brightly. Just enough. A thin silver beam stretched across the marble floor before disappearing beneath one of the oldest pillars in the hall. Cashin frowned. It's pointing somewhere. Mélisse nodded. The mirror is too weak to guide us. She looked at the glowing shard. But this piece still remembers. The hidden passage beneath the pillar had remained untouched for centuries. Dust covered every stone. Ancient cobwebs hung from the ceiling. As Kaelin, Cashin, Rowan, Mélisse, and a handful of trusted guards descended, silence swallowed them. No one spoke. Every step echoed through forgotten tunnels built long before Velrune had become a kingdom. The deeper they walked, the older the walls became. Modern stone gave way to polished white marble. Murals appeared. Unlike the paintings inside the palace above, these depicted something astonishing. Alphas and Omegas standing side by side. Queens leading councils. Kings listening rather than commanding. Children from every rank studying together beneath moonlit trees. Cashin stopped walking. This is impossible. No, Rowan whispered. This is memory. Meanwhile, beneath the sanctuary, the old guardian approached the silver door. He held out a small ceremonial knife. I don't wish to harm you. Lyra stared at him. Then let me leave. Pain crossed the old man's face. I can't. He looked away. My ancestors swore an oath. To whom? He answered without hesitation. To the first king. The words struck Lyra harder than any threat. The king who erased the queen. The old guardian closed his eyes. Yes. For a long moment, neither moved. Finally Lyra asked quietly, Have you ever wondered whether your ancestors were wrong? The old man's hands trembled. Every year of his life had been spent protecting a promise he had never questioned. Now, a frightened Omega servant had asked the one question he had spent decades avoiding. Farther inside the tunnels, Kaelin's group entered a circular chamber unlike anything they had seen before. At its center stood another mirror. Smaller, older. Its frame lacked jewels or silver ornaments. Simple, elegant. Mélisse approached slowly. This was the first mirror. Kaelin frowned. The sacred mirror? No. She shook her head. The sacred mirror above was built around this one. Rowan gently brushed centuries of dust away from the ancient frame. An inscription slowly appeared. Kaelin read the faded words aloud. The mirror reflects not blood, but the courage to place truth before power. Silence followed. Everything they had believed collapsed in a single sentence. The mirror had never judged noble birth. Never alpha blood. Never rank. Only character. 700 years of prejudice had never come from the moon goddess. It had come from men. At that very moment, beneath the sanctuary, the old guardian raised the ceremonial blade. He made a shallow cut across his own palm. Not Lyra's, his own. Blood dripped onto the silver door. Nothing happened. He smiled sadly. I knew it. Lyra looked confused. You never intended to use my blood. He nodded. I needed to know whether the stories were true. He lowered the knife. My family believed only the last daughter could awaken what sleeps beyond this door. He looked directly at Lyra. I don't think they understood. What? The door isn't waiting for your blood. He gently touched his chest. It's waiting for your choice. Before Lyra could answer, a deafening explosion shook the entire sanctuary. Dust rained from the ceiling. Stone cracked. The old guardian spun toward the entrance. Another blast echoed. One of the hooded figures rushed inside, panic written across his face. They've breached the outer tunnels. Who? The man struggled to catch his breath. The Iron Fang Legion. The old guardian's face drained of color. They're here. Lyra frowned. Who are they? He answered in a whisper filled with dread. The Northern Kingdom. They've come for the mirror. Far above, alarm horns thundered across Velrune. Archers rushed onto the palace walls. Messengers sprinted through the snowy streets. From the highest tower, black banners could already be seen emerging through the mountain pass. An army, 1,000 strong, moving beneath the symbol of the Iron Fang. Kaelin climbed onto the palace battlements just as the first snowstorm of the season swept across the valley. The enemy had chosen their moment perfectly. A divided kingdom, a broken mirror, a missing girl, an ancient secret on the verge of being uncovered. Behind him, Cashin spoke the words everyone feared. They didn't come by coincidence. Kaelin's eyes remained fixed on the distant army. No. They knew exactly when the mirror awakened. Deep beneath the palace, the silver door suddenly shimmered for the first time in 7 centuries. Not because blood had touched it, but because Lyra stepped toward it of her own free will. As her fingertips brushed its surface, a warm feminine voice echoed from the other side. "Welcome home, my daughter." The silver door did not swing open. It breathed. A soft ripple spread across its polished surface like moonlight gliding over a still lake. The ancient crescent carved into its center began to glow, not with blinding brilliance, but with a gentle silver warmth that filled the sanctuary. Every candle in the chamber burned higher. The chains around Lyra's wrists unlocked with a quiet click and slipped harmlessly onto the stone floor. No one had touched them. The old guardian stepped back instinctively. His weathered face lost every trace of certainty. "For 70 years," he whispered. "I believe this door demanded blood." Lyra looked at the silver surface. It asked for nothing. The old man slowly lowered his head. "No." His voice trembled. It waited for someone who would come willingly. The heavy stone beneath their feet vibrated gently. The door dissolved into shimmering light. Beyond it lay no throne room, no hidden treasury, no chamber filled with weapons. Instead, a vast circular sanctuary opened beneath the mountain itself. Its ceiling disappeared into darkness, where thousands of tiny crystals reflected the moonlight filtering through natural cracks in the stone above. Silver streams flowed silently around white marble pathways, their waters glowing faintly beneath the cavern. Ancient wolves rested peacefully among flowering trees that somehow bloomed despite the endless winter outside. Not spirits, real wolves, old beyond imagination. They slowly raised their heads as Lyra entered. None growled, none retreated. One by one, they stood and bowed. The old guardian sank to his knees. They remember. Far above, Kaelin and the others reached the final stretch of the underground passage. The glowing shard taken from the sacred mirror floated gently ahead, guiding them through twisting corridors untouched for centuries. Suddenly, the light stopped. A smooth wall of white stone blocked their path. "There should be another passage," Cashin muttered. "There is." Meili stepped forward. She rested her palm against the wall. Nothing happened. Rowan tried. Still nothing. Finally, Kaelin approached. The wall remained unchanged. He looked toward the glowing shard. "It isn't asking for us." His eyes shifted to the empty corridor behind them. "It's waiting for Lyra." Inside the hidden sanctuary, the oldest wolf slowly approached. Its fur had once been pure white, though time had painted streaks of silver along its back. Deep amber eyes studied Lyra with quiet wisdom rather than curiosity. She instinctively lowered herself onto one knee. The wolf sniffed her hand, then gently pressed its forehead against hers. A flood of warmth rushed through her. Not pain, not magic forcing itself into her mind. Memory. She saw a kingdom unlike the one she had known. Children laughing together regardless of rank. Alphas serving beside Omegas. Councils led by wisdom instead of status. A queen walking among her people without guards because none feared her. Then, the memories darkened. A terrible winter. Empty harvests. Hungry villages. Fear spreading from one pack to another. Nobles demanding stronger rule. One ambitious alpha claiming compassion had made the kingdom weak. The queen refused to surrender her principles. He answered with betrayal. The vision shattered. Lyra stumbled backward, tears filling her eyes. The old wolf remained beside her, as if silently apologizing for history itself. A gentle voice drifted through the sanctuary. "You have kind eyes." Lyra slowly turned. The woman from the mirror stood only a few steps away. She looked exactly as she had in the visions. Simple white robes, long dark hair, no crown, only quiet dignity. Lyra's breath caught. The first queen. The woman smiled softly. "I was called Elira." Her voice carried warmth that eased something deep inside Lyra's heart. "You've waited 700 years," Lyra whispered. Elira shook her head. "No, I waited for the kingdom." Lyra frowned. "I don't understand. The mirror never searched for my bloodline." She stepped closer. It searched for someone willing to place truth above power. She gently touched Lyra's shoulder. "You are not my heir because we share blood." Lyra blinked. "We don't." Elira smiled. "No. You are my heir because you made the same choice." For a long moment, Lyra simply stared. Everything she had feared, everything others had believed, the prophecy, the hidden bloodline, the chosen descendant, none of it mattered. The mirror had chosen her because of who she was, not because of who she came from. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. "I've spent my whole life believing I was worth less than everyone else." Elora gently wiped away one tear. "And yet, you still chose kindness." That is why the mirror smiled. Back inside the palace, the council had collapsed into chaos. News of the Iron Fang army spread faster than the winter wind. Some nobles demanded surrender. Others wanted immediate war. Duchess Seraphine stood silently near the great windows overlooking the valley. For the first time, doubt reached her. She had spent decades defending traditions she believed preserved peace. Now an enemy kingdom marched toward Velrune with impossible precision. How had they known? Unless someone inside Velrune had been feeding them secrets. Her eyes widened. The conspiracy had never protected the kingdom. It had weakened it. The hidden sanctuary trembled violently. A young messenger rushed inside. "The northern soldiers have entered the lower tunnels." The old guardian closed his eyes. "They found us." Lyra looked toward Queen Elora. "What do I do?" The ancient queen glanced toward the wolves surrounding them. "You already know." Lyra understood. The truth was never meant to remain hidden. If the enemy captured it, another 700 years of lies would begin. She turned toward the old guardian. "Will you help me?" He looked around the sanctuary. At the wolves. At the queen he had spent a lifetime denying. At the door he had sworn to protect. Finally, he removed the ancient chain hanging around his neck. It carried the seal of the first king. He placed it gently on the stone floor. "My family serve fear." He bowed deeply. "I choose truth." At that exact moment, the sealed stone wall blocking Kaelin's path dissolved into silver dust. The king rushed forward. His eyes immediately found Lyra standing in the center of the sanctuary. She looked exhausted, but unbroken. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Neither needed to. Relief said everything words could not. Kaelin slowly walked toward her. "I was afraid I'd be too late." Lyra smiled faintly. "You weren't." He looked around the sanctuary. Then his eyes settled upon Queen Elora. Without hesitation, the Alpha King removed his sword, placed it carefully on the ground, and lowered himself onto one knee. Not because prophecy demanded it, not because magic forced him, but because truth deserved humility. Queen Elora smiled with quiet gratitude. "You are becoming the king your father hoped you would be." Suddenly the entire sanctuary shook. Far above, another explosion thundered through the mountain. Dust rained from the crystal ceiling. One of the ancient wolves lifted its head and growled toward the tunnels. A second joined, then a third. Within moments, every wolf in the sanctuary stood, eyes fixed toward the darkness beyond. The enemy had arrived. As Kaelin reached for his sword, Queen Elora looked toward the ceiling where cracks spread through the ancient stone. Her peaceful expression turned solemn. "The mirror can reveal the truth." She looked at Lyra. Only one final time. Then the entire mountain echoed with the sound of thousands of enemy soldiers breaking through the last defensive gate. The final battle for Velrune had begun. The first impact shook the mountain like thunder. Stone dust drifted from the crystal ceiling. The peaceful sanctuary that had remained untouched for 7 centuries suddenly echoed with steel striking stone, and the distant cries of soldiers forcing their way through the lower tunnels. The ancient wolves rose as one, not with panic, with purpose. Their amber eyes reflected the silver light flowing through the sanctuary, and every movement carried the quiet discipline of guardians who had protected this place long before Velrune had become a kingdom. Queen Elora remained calm. She looked toward the sacred mirror's oldest frame, standing at the center of the sanctuary. "It is time." Kaelin stepped beside Lyra. "Our warriors can hold them." Queen Elora slowly shook her head. "They are not here only for the sanctuary." Her eyes lifted toward the mountain above. "They are here because someone promised them a kingdom already divided." Far above, Velrune was falling into chaos. The Iron Fang banners appeared beyond the snow-covered ridges like dark scars across the white mountains. War horns echoed from every tower. Villagers fled behind the city walls while blacksmiths abandoned their forges to sharpen weapons through the freezing morning. Yet the greatest danger did not come from outside. It lived inside every fearful heart. Some nobles shouted that the enemy had come because the sacred mirror had awakened. Others blamed the Omegas. Still others demanded that Lyra be surrendered to spare the kingdom. Families who had lived beside one another for generations suddenly questioned neighbors they had trusted their entire lives. Fear had become a weapon, exactly as the conspiracy had intended. Deep beneath the palace, Queen Lyra rested one gentle hand upon the ancient mirror. Its simple silver frame shimmered softly. The sacred mirror was never created to choose rulers. She looked toward Kaelin. It was created so no ruler could hide from truth. Kaelin's expression hardened. Can it still reveal the past? Only once, Lyra quietly asked. And afterward? The queen smiled sadly. It will finally rest. Silence filled the sanctuary. Every person understood what that meant. The mirror had waited 7 centuries for this moment. It had no future beyond it. The old guardian slowly approached. For the first time in his life, he stood before Queen Lyra not as a jailer of history, but as a servant seeking forgiveness. My queen! His voice trembled. My family carried the wrong oath. Lyra gently touched his shoulder. You carried the only truth you were given. Tears filled the old man's eyes. I failed you. No. She smiled with quiet kindness. You are choosing differently. He lowered his head, and for the first time in 70 years, the weight upon his soul began to lift. Suddenly, hurried footsteps echoed through the sanctuary. Prince Cassian rushed inside, breathing hard. They've broken through the eastern tunnels. Behind him came wounded palace guards supporting one another. They're only minutes away. Kaelin turned immediately. Cassian, his younger cousin, nodded before the order was even spoken. We hold the entrance. Within moments, every loyal warrior formed a defensive line across the narrow stone bridge leading into the sanctuary. No speeches, no dramatic vows, only determined silence. They knew exactly what they were protecting. Not a throne, not a crown. The truth. Lyra stepped before the mirror. Its surface rippled gently. Instead of showing her reflection, it remained empty. Queen Lyra stood beside her. The mirror has one question left. Lyra frowned. What question? The queen looked directly into her eyes. If revealing the truth costs everything, will you still choose it? Lyra closed her eyes. She thought of Rowan, of frightened Omega children, of Kaelin kneeling before an ordinary servant, of birds resting in her hands, of the countless lives shaped by a lie they never chose. When she opened her eyes again, there was no hesitation. Yes, the mirror answered. Silver light exploded across the sanctuary. Above the palace, every mirror in Velrune awakened. Small household mirrors, polished shields, still lakes frozen beneath winter ice, silver serving trays. Even the cracked sacred mirror inside the palace hall blazed with light once more. Across the kingdom, wolves stopped what they were doing. Every reflective surface became alive. Then, the past appeared. Not stories, not legends. Truth. The people watched Queen Lyra walking among farmers during harsh winters, sharing food before feeding herself. They watched alphas and omegas building the palace together. They watched children of every rank studying beneath the same roof. Then came betrayal. A respected alpha general secretly gathering fearful nobles. Forged accusations. False prophecies. Quiet assassinations. The queen refusing violence, even when offered an army. Finally, King Alaric placing his own royal seal upon the decree, ordering every record of Queen Lyra to be destroyed. The entire kingdom witnessed it together. No historian could deny it. No noble could rewrite it. Truth belonged to everyone now. Inside the sanctuary, the ancient mirror began to crack. Fine silver fractures spread slowly across its surface. Queen Lyra looked at it with peaceful acceptance. It has carried this memory long enough. Outside, the battle reached its fiercest moment. The Iron Fawn commander himself entered the sanctuary. He stopped, not because of Kaelin's sword, but because every soldier behind him suddenly stared into polished armor reflecting the same memories. The invaders had expected a kingdom built on lies. Instead, they witnessed honesty. Confusion spread through their ranks. Their commander lowered his blade. He looked toward Kaelin. So, he said quietly, we were manipulated too. Kaelin lowered his own sword. There has been enough deception. For several long moments, neither king ordered an attack. The fighting simply stopped. One by one, weapons fell onto the stone floor. The mirror's cracks widened. Queen Lyra turned toward Lyra one final time. "You feared you were invisible." Lyra nodded, tears streaming freely now. "I did." The queen smiled. "The mirror never reflected you because it wished to make you important." She gently touched Lyra's heart. It reflected what had always been there. The sanctuary filled with soft silver light. Queen Lyra slowly stepped backward. Her form became transparent. The ancient wolves lowered their heads. "So this is goodbye," Lyra whispered. "No." The queen's voice had become almost part of the light itself. "It is remembrance." The mirror shattered. Not violently, not with thunder. It simply dissolved into thousands of tiny silver fragments that drifted upward like snow caught in moonlight. Every piece vanished before touching the ground. 700 years of waiting had finally ended. Kalen walked quietly toward Lyra. No crown rested upon his head. No royal ceremony surrounded them. He simply stopped beside her. "The kingdom will ask me to place a crown upon you." Lyra looked at him. "What if I don't want one?" A gentle smile crossed his face. "Then I won't." She laughed softly through her tears. For the first time in many days, it sounded completely genuine. He extended his hand. "Walk beside me instead." Lyra looked at the empty place where the mirror had stood, then at the people waiting beyond the sanctuary. Finally, she placed her hand in his, not because prophecy demanded it, not because destiny had written it, but because trust had slowly become something stronger. Choice. As dawn broke over Velrune, the last silver fragment of a sacred mirror drifted into the winter sky. Far below, a group of children gathered before the now empty frame. One little Omega girl looked up and quietly asked, "Will it ever reflect anyone again?" No one answered, because the final chapter of the mirror's story had ended. But the first chapter of Velrune's new future was only just beginning. The winter storm ended before sunrise. For the first time in days, sunlight poured across the mountains of Velrune, turning every snow-covered peak into silver and gold. The battlefield outside the palace had fallen silent. No victory songs echoed through the valley. No triumphant celebrations filled the streets. Instead, wolves from both kingdoms worked side by side, carrying the wounded, clearing fallen stone, and rebuilding the gates broken during the night's fighting. The greatest battle had ended without conquest, not because one army had been stronger, but because the truth had robbed hatred of its purpose. Inside the great hall, the empty frame of a sacred mirror remained where it had stood for 700 years. Its silver branches still curled around nothing. The glass was gone. Only the frame remained. Many nobles expected Kalen to remove it immediately. He refused. "Leave it." His quiet command surprised the court. It reminds us that truth is more important than the object that revealed it. No one argued, not even Duchess Seraphine. The royal council gathered once more. This time, the atmosphere felt entirely different. There were no raised voices, no whispered alliances, no accusations, only a long silence as everyone faced the weight of what they had witnessed. Finally, Seraphine stepped forward. She removed the jeweled chain marking her position as head of the noble council. Every eye followed her. She placed it gently upon the council table. "I defended laws I believed protected this kingdom." Her voice remained steady, though sorrow lingered beneath every word. "I now know those laws protected fear instead." She turned toward Lyra. "I cannot erase the suffering they caused." Her head bowed. "But I can stop defending them." Lyra crossed the room. Instead of speaking from across the hall, she stood before the Duchess. "You were wrong." Seraphine nodded. "I was. But you are here." The Duchess looked up. "And that matters." For several long moments, neither woman moved. Then Lyra extended her hand. Seraphine accepted it, not as rivals, as two women choosing a better future than the one they had inherited. Around the chamber, shoulders relaxed. Justice had arrived, not through humiliation, through honesty. The ancient decree erasing Queen Lyra was publicly burned before the people of Velrune. Not in anger, in remembrance. Copies of the restored history were carried into every village, every school, every library, and every pack house across the kingdom. Children listened wide-eyed as elders read aloud the story of the queen who had ruled through compassion rather than fear. For the first time in 7 centuries, no child grew up believing that courage belonged to only one rank. Several days later, Kaelin visited Rowan's cottage alone. The old healer sat outside beneath the winter sun, carefully trimming dried herbs. She smiled before he spoke. "You've come without guards. I wanted to thank you." She laughed softly. "You came to ask permission." Kaelin smiled despite himself. "I suppose I did." Rowan set the herbs aside. "You love her." He looked toward the snow-covered forest. "I respect her. That wasn't my question." He sighed quietly. "I've ruled this kingdom for years. I've won battles, settled disputes, negotiated peace. But somehow," he smiled, "the bravest thing I've ever considered doing is asking an Omega servant whether she'll walk beside me." Rowan's eyes glistened warmly. "Good." He blinked. "Good. The day a king fears a woman's answer is the day he finally understands equality." Lyra spent those same days helping rebuild the palace. Despite every noble insisting she should rest, she quietly joined the servants repairing damaged kitchens and organizing supplies for families displaced by the fighting. Nothing about her had changed. She still carried buckets of water, still swept dusty corridors, still greeted cooks before sunrise. A young Omega servant finally asked the question everyone wondered. "You could command us now." Lyra smiled. "Why would I?" The girl hesitated. "Because you're important." Lyra gently placed another loaf of bread into the child's basket. "So are you." 1 week later, the kingdom gathered beneath a clear winter sky. The moon coronation festival had been postponed because of the invasion. Now it returned, but everything about it felt different. No sacred mirror waited inside the great hall. Instead, an ordinary mirror crafted by local artisans stood upon a simple wooden platform. It held no magic, no prophecy, no judgment, only reflection. Children from every family stepped forward first. Alpha, Beta, Omega, craftsman, farmer, healer, warrior. Every smiling face appeared equally in the polished glass. The crowd watched quietly. Some cried without realizing it. Others laughed through tears they had carried for years. When the ceremony ended, Kaelin approached Lyra beneath the palace gardens where snow continued falling in soft white flakes. No guards followed, no council observed. Only winter birds rested among the branches nearby. The same tiny gray bird that had once landed beside Lyra fluttered onto the stone fountain. She smiled immediately. "It remembers me." Kaelin looked at the bird. Perhaps. He looked back at her. Or perhaps kindness is simply unforgettable. Silence settled comfortably between them. Then he spoke. "There is something I wish to ask." Lyra waited. "I cannot promise there will never be difficult winters. I cannot promise every wolf will agree with our choices. I cannot promise we'll never fail." She smiled gently. "I wouldn't believe you if you did." He laughed. The sound surprised even him. "But," he continued, "I can promise that no decision shaping this kingdom will ever again be made without hearing your voice." He extended his hand. "Not as a queen chosen by a mirror, not as a symbol, as Lyra Ashvale, the woman I trust most." Her eyes shimmered, not because she had been offered power, because she had been offered partnership. She placed her hand in his. "I'll walk beside you." The winter birds burst into flight. Snow drifted gently through the quiet garden, and somewhere beyond the palace walls, a chorus of wolves lifted their voices toward the moon. Not in mourning, in welcome. Years passed. Velrune changed slowly, the way mountains change, not in a single moment, but through countless quiet seasons. The Moon Archive reopened to scholars from every pack. The restored story of Queen Lyra became the first lesson every child learned, reminding them that truth must never depend on rank or power. The empty frame of the sacred mirror remained in the great hall untouched. Visitors often paused before it, not to seek prophecy, but to remember that justice survives only when ordinary people choose honesty over comfort. King Kaelin and Lyra never ruled from a distance. They walked through villages together, listened before deciding, and judged no wolf by birth alone. Over time, the titles people used for Lyra mattered less than the life she lived. To some she was queen, To others, she was still the gentle woman who once carried water through palace corridors. On quiet winter evenings, children loved gathering beneath the old mirror frame. Elders would tell the story of the frightened Omega servant who accidentally stood before an ancient mirror and revealed the greatest lie a kingdom had ever believed. One curious child always asked the same question. If the mirror is gone, how do we know who's worthy now? The elder would smile, looking around at the faces glowing in the firelight. We don't ask a mirror anymore. We ask our hearts. Outside, snow would continue falling over the forests of Velrune, wolves would answer one another beneath the moon, and life would move forward with gentle hope. Because after 700 years, the kingdom had finally learned its greatest lesson. The sacred mirror did not change the world. It simply reflected the courage that had been waiting inside one ordinary girl all along.